Imagine this. You wake up one morning, stretch, open your blinds, and sip your coffee. Everything feels normal until you glance at the front door. There, taped in bright red letters, is a notice that makes your heart sink. The HOA has declared your entire house illegal. Illegal? You blink twice, thinking it must be some kind of sick joke. But no, the letter is real, stamped with their seal of authority. And right there, in bold black words, it says, immediate compliance required. Demolish unauthorized structure or face legal seizure. Before I go on, hit that like button and subscribe, because this is one story of ordinary people standing up against HOA tyranny that you don't want to miss. Now, let me take you deep into this unbelievable true story. At first, the homeowner, a man named David Miller, thought it was some mistake. David was a quiet, hardworking father who had saved for years to buy his dream home in a clean, quiet neighborhood. He worked long shifts at a logistics company, and the house meant everything to him and his family. It was not just bricks and wood, it was stability, pride, and years of sacrifice finally rewarded. The HOA board, however, didn't see it that way. A few weeks after David moved in, strange letters began showing up. First, it was about his mailbox color being non-compliant. Then, about his grass shade not matching the community tone. David laughed these off at first. Even painted the mailbox, even hired someone to look at his lawn. He thought compliance was part of the deal. But he soon realized the HOA wasn't just about rules. It was about control. Then came the big blow. A certified letter saying that his entire house violated the HOA's architectural. According to them, the angle of his roof was non-approved, and the layout of his porch was in violation. The kicker? They demanded demolition of the illegal structure. David's heart sank. His house wasn't just legal. It had passed city inspections, permits, and zoning checks. How could the HOA declare it illegal? That was the moment David's defiance began. David called the HOA president, a smug man named Richard Coleman, who carried himself like a little king. Richard spoke with a tone that dripped arrogance. Mr. Miller, you bought into this community. You agreed to follow our rules. If you don't comply, we will seize your property. David clenched his fists. He had spent his life working hard, never once imagining he'd be threatened like this over a technicality. He told Richard, you may run this board, but you don't own me. My house is legal, and I'm not tearing down a single brick. From that moment, the battle began. The HOA started piling on the pressure. Daily fines, threatening letters, notices plastered on his door for the whole neighborhood to see. Neighbors whispered, some avoiding him, others secretly cheering him on. David felt the walls closing in, but he wasn't about to give up. So he went to see a lawyer, a tough, sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Daniels, who had dealt with HOA bullies before. When David laid the stack of letters on her desk, she frowned, then smirked. They've overplayed their hand, she said. Declaring your house illegal? That's not just abuse of power, it's fraud. Together they began to dig. Sarah pulled public records, building permits, and city zoning files. What they found was shocking. The HOA's architectural code had been secretly altered just months earlier, with rules backdated to make David's home non-compliant. Even worse, Richard Coleman and 2 board members had ties to a local developer who wanted David's property for expansion. They weren't protecting community standards, they were trying to steal his home. The next HOA meeting was chaos. David showed up with Sarah and a thick folder of evidence. The board members sat smugly, expecting him to fold under pressure. But David stood tall and said, you declared my house illegal. You fined me, harassed me, and tried to break me. But tonight, the truth comes out. Sarah laid the documents on the table. The HOA has falsified records, altered codes, and engaged in fraud with intent to seize Mr. Miller's property. We have enough here to not only overturn your actions, but to bring this entire board under criminal investigation. The room went silent. Gasps echoed. Neighbors who had once been afraid now murmured in support. Richard's face turned pale as Sarah continued, if you pursue this further, we will take this to court. And trust me, the penalties will destroy this board. The board tried to bluff, but the evidence was overwhelming. Within weeks, an emergency vote was called by the residents themselves. Richard and his allies were ousted, replaced by a new board that promised transparency and fairness. As for David, Not only was every fine erased, but the HOA was forced to issue a written apology and pay his legal fees. Richard later faced investigations for corruption, his little empire of power crumbling into dust. David stood on his porch one evening, watching his kids play in the yard, the sun setting over the roof they had once tried to take away. He smiled, not just because he had won, but because justice had prevailed. He had proven that when an HOA crosses the line, one person's courage can bring the whole system crashing down. So here's the truth: HOAs may act like they hold all the power, but their authority is not limitless. When they cross into injustice, there's always a way to fight back. And sometimes all it takes is one person daring to say, enough is enough. If you enjoyed this story and want more true battles of ordinary people standing up against unfair HOAs, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Because the more we spread these stories, the more power we give back to the people who truly deserve it. And remember, justice doesn't knock politely. Sometimes it kicks the HOA's door wide open,